years ago, my best friend, Nancy Stage, died from complications, stage 4 breast cancer. There isn't anything that Nancy wouldn't have done for me, and there's nothing that I wouldn't have done for her. We were true sisters, bonded not by blood and genetics, but by something much more profound and something much deeper. The year that she passed away was also the year that I launched a conversation about commercial surrogacy. I wanted to explore language. It was interesting to me that we use the language of donation in adoption and assisted reproductive technology, when really what was happening in assisted reproductive technology was the purchasing of sperm, the purchasing of ova, and the renting of wombs. And in fact, if we were to look at that on a global scale, it turns out that there were lots of body parts that were up for grabs, that were up for sale in parts of China, India, Pakistan, Thailand, and other places. And in fact, it's grown so profoundly that some have called it like wildfire, what's happened in the sphere of assisted reproductive technology. Now, there are certainly upsides. A very good friend of mine, Martha Ertman, says that what ART does is that it helps to correct for Mother Nature's discrimination against gay people. And she's right. I mean, others have said it helps families that have struggled with infertility to be able to have families. Those are some upsides. And even for the women who are involved, the surrogates who come from unsafe areas where there's poor sanitation and where they live in slums, becoming a surrogate means 3 or 4 meals a day. It means a roof over their heads. It means some protection. But what exists behind the masks? It's a much more complicated experience. The truth of it is, many of these women represent cheap wombs for the West. In the United States, it can cost upwards of $100,000, $110,000, $150,000 to have a surrogate. In India, it can be as cheap as $5,000, $6,000 or $7,000 or $8,000, and let there be no mistake, it's not that those women receive that $5,000 or that $6,000. They're lucky if they get maybe $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000, that the broker doesn't take all of the money. I mean, let's be real about what this represents. So then we might ask, well, why do they do it? Well, they do it because they're destitute, because they live in poverty, because of the violence that they experience at home, because they're looking for a way out. Because they're looking for a way out, not just for themselves, but they're looking for a way out for their children too. I've spent lots of time in India. I've been in the regions of Bihar and other parts all across India. And for lots of women on a spectrum, it happens to be selling dung patties, sex work, surrogacy is somewhere on a scale of pretty awful choices. And we have to understand what that's about. And for some of them, it's really about breaking the cycle so that their daughters don't experience what they did, sometimes being forced into underage marriages as young as 8 or 9 or 10 years old, and the violence that comes with that. But there are real costs that are associated with our exportation of our demands from the West to those who live within the global South. And sometimes that even includes death, and it includes sickness, or sometimes it includes the fact that people from the West change their minds. They leave babies behind. Or it also means that these women have no power in the contracting. Many of these women happen to be illiterate. They sign the contracts with an X or with a thumbprint. And I ask you, is that what love looks like? Is that what sisterhood looks like? I think not. And for the babies who are left behind, there's another type of market that results, often a black market in babies. And that begs the question as to what will governments from the West do with the babies that are left behind in places like India. Sisterhood means something far more than the intimacy and the claims of love that are on the table with these exchanges. Let's remember that love has been a very curious point of cover in relationships. Women will know this. Think about this. Rape of a wife was legal in most parts of the world. Why? Because it was presumed that a husband really loved his wife. Domestic violence was something that law enforcement turned a blind eye to. Why? Because it was perceived that husbands truly loved their wives. And at the very least, it was an intimate relationship. The very language that's being used to justify these relationships are the ones that women have fought against for decades, if not for centuries. But let me put it in context in a different way that will resonate perhaps for people who are here from the United States. In the United States, we suffered through a system of Jim Crow. It existed in the aftermath of slavery. A very good friend of mine, Jonathan Odell, who's an author, he's a Southern white gay guy, who says that in his past life, he was an old black woman. But what he writes about are Southern relationships. And what he says is that whites in the South would often say that the black women who scrubbed their floors, that nursed their children, that took care of everything, that they loved them just like family. But love can be a cover for coercion. Love can be a cover for inequality. Love can be a cover for the fact that we don't treat people fairly, economically and otherwise. Because while Jonathan's family claimed that they just loved their black maid, he and his family were able to walk through the front door of shops, of theaters, stores, and restaurants. Their maids were lucky if they ever even got through the back door. So we need to think in much more complicated and nuanced ways about love and intimacy in the new age of creating families. Now I want to close with a thought. What does sisterhood, love, and intimacy demand in the realm of surrogacy? It demands respect. It demands accountability. It demands integrity. It demands equality. And it demands all of these things, not just from the top down, but from the bottom up. Recently, we celebrated the 10th anniversary of our Baby Markets Symposium. It's time for book number 2. And there was a closing comment by Professor Dorothy Roberts, a wonderful friend of mine. And I want to leave you with a thought that she shared with us. And that is that baby markets are not free. Thank you.